I think we have a picture of it, but we just introduced the world's most fuel-efficient jet engine. We spent $11 billion in 20 years reinventing the jet engine to bring to market the world's most fuel-efficient jet engine. It reduces fuel burn by 16%, which is a generational gain in the life of a jet engine. Usually if you can get 1, 2, 3%, that's great. 16% at once is a big gain that we're proud of. It reduces NOx pollutants by 50%, and then it reduces the noise footprint of the jet engine in the airplane by 75%. So if you think about it in the context of shared value, there's 4 things going on here. From the natural environment standpoint, that 16% improvement in fuel burn means less fuel. And so we know our orders, and so we know by 2025, jets flying with this engine will save 15 billion gallons of fuel just by 2025. That's enough fuel to go to Mars and back. So there's a lot of carbon savings in the avoidance of that fuel burn as we ramp up aviation. So there's value to the environment. There's value to our customers like JetBlue. Even at today's lower fuel prices, this jet engine saves $1 million per year per airplane on fuel costs. And fuel cost is usually the number 1 or number 2 item for an airplane. So there's value to the customer. There's value to people because of this noise reduction, the 75% reduction in noise. You know, we've mapped airports around the world. Take LaGuardia Airport here in New York. If every airplane flying in and out of LaGuardia had this jet engine, we would remove 500,000 people from the noise impact zone just at LaGuardia Airport. That's 500,000 people that would no longer hear the airplane. So there's value to people, and then there's value to our share owners. We're a publicly traded company. We are differentiating our technology through this means, and so there's value to the planet, there's value to people, there's value to our customers, and there's value to our share owners.
So let me just follow up with you on that a couple ways. The first, what's at the heart of the motivation to create this engine?
Well, the heart of the motivation is to bring value to our customers. I mean, we're in business to serve our customers. And our customers tell us that, you know, fuel costs are a number 1 concern from a cost standpoint for many of the airlines around the world. So, you know, we kind of sat back and say, how do we leapfrog technology? How do we reinvent the jet engine so that we can get these generational gains in fuel efficiency today and deliver them to our customers? So that's the motivation.
And so is there a future I'm certain, I mean, obviously this is a breakthrough technology, which means that you probably have a remarkable group of scientists and engineers working constantly on innovation, right? So if you were to project out, are you looking at how you can use renewables or even something so extreme as solar, I mean, in order to power this? Is this part of your R&D that you're involved with? You don't have to share any secrets. I'm just kind of...
No, for sure. I mean, and I think Sophia's in a better place to talk about some of the cool things that JetBlue has been doing in that area. But this engine can be used with renewable fuels. It's qualified to do that. You know, we continue to push technologies to even get more efficiencies out of than what we see here.
Okay, thank you.
And the way John just put it, it really explains why aviation is a sweet spot where everybody wins. It's like the ideal business case for sustainability, and it's underutilized by our industry and the folks in this room. I mean, it saves the company money, it saves the consumer money, it reduces emissions. Using less fuel, it means using less oil, it's not a direct, you know, jobs conflict. There's so many benefits to this that weave together really nicely, and I think because we're all under the assumption that, oh no, if you fly, you have a bad carbon footprint, but it's okay because I'm going to a sustainability conference, you know, that you can package that all together. So the technology is the win here. And in that sweet spot with that technology, it's the companies who have the original product that are disrupting themselves. So you don't necessarily get a push and pull from different industries. No one is fighting to maintain a status quo of higher fuel costs. That's why you get relationships like this working together. If they build it, we will buy it. You will save, the emissions go down. So
let's talk about that partnership because as a customer, you actually have influence. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm always asked by audiences, so what's our power? And I always say you got a couple powers. You got a power of how you vote, but your real power is what you buy. So could you describe to us your partnership and the motivation behind it? And do you go to United Technologies and say, we're looking around for an engine. We want the engine that's going to deliver X, Y, and Z because you have certain sustainability targets. How does that work?
Well, there's no one clean spot where you start breaking a chicken and egg problem. As John will talk about in a second, they've been working on this engine for decades. While they're working on it, a consumer brand like JetBlue is watching consumer interest in climate change and offsetting and flying tick up, such that to the point when it boils to the surface and we want to begin engaging and acting on it, we turn to our technology providers.
And do they have influence over you?
Oh, sure. I mean, the motivation behind developing this engine is feedback from our customers saying that, we want to lower our fuel consumption. It saves money, but it has these huge environmental dividends. And so, that constant feedback to us, we feed that into our scientists and our technologists and challenge them to say, no, we can't just continue to develop technology the way we always have and get the 1% to 2% improvements. We need a big generational gain, and that's what we've done with this jet engine. I have a second picture just to show on how collaboration can work, and we're thinking about these differently. So this is Sophia and me, and we signed our first MOU on green aviation with JetBlue together, and just to talk about different ways that we can engage audiences like you, stakeholders around the world to look at how do we think about the aviation industry in a different way, as Sophia mentioned, as a sweet spot to address the shared value that there is in reducing carbon emissions, reducing fuel burn, reducing noise, and what that means for society overall.
And to the point about power, the individual consumer has so much voice with an airline. And it's how you talk to the in-flight crew member who's helping you on board, because they write down customer comments and those go into a system, and that system looks for keywords and that comes back as feedback. It's about what you say on social media when you're asking proactive questions about climate change. It's about what you write in to senior leaders in the company, to the customer service, what you call, what you say when you call 1-800, because everyone's expecting questions about bags. So when you get a question about climate, it really sticks out. And I know we have a lot of practitioners in the room. The companies you work for have corporate level contracts with airlines. Those contracts are negotiated by corporate salespeople. Tell your travel managers that your brand cares about this issue. And that becomes part of the contract and ultimately comes back to someone like me and results in something like offsetting.
And in addition to the technology, which we're very proud of, our partners like JetBlue are doing very cool things to even reduce the carbon footprint using the technology in other means, like in biofuels. I don't know if you want to talk about what you've done there, but it's really, really impressive.
Yeah, thank you for that lovely opening.
That was going to be my next question, by the way.
I am not shy to say that I'm quite proud that last year, while I was 9 months pregnant, JetBlue signed the largest biofuels deal in aviation history, where we committed and signed on the line that we will be buying a biofuel in 2019 and going on through 2020 for a total of 330 million gallons with up to a 50% CO2 reduction. And that's how you start to change the system. That's where it all comes back to the technology, the engineers, and the scientists, and the pressure from consumers like you creating a sweet spot where a practitioner such as ourselves has the ability to do a deal like that.
So this is a strong demonstration of a traditional business-to-business relationship that is mutually beneficial. My understanding is that your partnership goes beyond the traditional business-to-business relationship. Can you describe that?
Well, I think this MOU is a good example of how certainly JetBlue is an important customer for us, but together we believe that we can add value engaging stakeholders around these issues to talk about more broadly about how aviation can advance more sustainably beyond just our relationship to other stakeholders in the aviation space. And so that's new for us to be able to collaborate in that way. And I give the credit to JetBlue that had proposed that we do this type of MOU to share expertise. They certainly have tremendous expertise. On their end, we bring a technical element together, and together we think that we can do a lot of interesting things like forums like this.
Can I add on to that and start
Sure.
addressing questions on the screen?
No, I have a different another question.
No, you go.
Go ahead.
I'm just
you
so
want to add to
excited.
that? I want you to be excited. This is really good. Before you actually, my question actually is, where do we get glasses like those?
This is in our
These are beautiful.
This is in our jet engine factory in Middletown, Connecticut, which Sophia and her team toured. And so it's a factory, so they're safety goggles, and that's the engine right behind us.
Yeah.
My question that I wanted to ask you actually was, so we talked earlier before we came on the stage about the power of the consumer, and you mentioned this. What are you hearing? What are you hearing at JetBlue from your consumers? Because you have obviously, well, I'd just like to know, what is it that they're communicating to you about environment? I mean, do you see an increased interest? Is this something that there's a concern, or is there how are you listening and engaging with them?
So yes, customers are interested. Yes, they're communicating, and we need more of it. And it is still to a minority of customers who actively vocalize their interest beyond the core product back to the brand. On my side, it's JetBlue's responsibility to make sure the core elements of your experience are taken care of. So one, safety, safety, and safety. And we'd be remiss if an engine manufacturer and an airline weren't talking about safety on any panel. Mm-hmm. Safety, convenience, availability, affordability, details of the experience in air. When you take care of those base pillars of the product, you open up space for the consumer to ask the brand about something like sustainability.
So before I go to these questions, I want to ask you, not specifically about green aviation, but clearly aviation's a lot in the news now. Mm-hmm. And again, it's that social media smartphone that puts it right in front of you,
Darn
right?
Thing.
Yeah. And I guess my question is, you talk about doubling of aviation traffic. Is the infrastructure in place to be able to handle that? Because clearly, what all of us who are people that spend our time flying are experiencing is a real challenge at airports and in customer service, and the stress level with flight attendants. I mean, that's not a job you want. I mean, that would be a tough position.
A lot of people love that job.
Well,
they do. It's true. It can be a great job.
I'm not saying it can't be a great job. I'm saying that the stress level that comes with it, and it's creates challenges at times. So it's really an infrastructure question. I mean, can we handle that more traffic?
Well, I mean, I think where the rapid growth is going to happen is in China, it's in India, it's in places like that where the infrastructure is needed. And just one interesting example, which actually relates to sustainability, is in the United States, about 75% of the airspace is open for commercial traffic. And that when a JetBlue pilot takes off, he or she has pre-approved flight plans by which they can navigate the route, primarily to avoid strong headwinds to burn less fuel. In other countries, that's not the case. In some countries, it's the reverse, that just 25% of the air travel is open for commercial airspace, which means that you think the sky is big, but the lanes are actually quite narrow for commercial airspace in a lot of emerging economies. What that means is It takes longer to get to cruise altitude, and jet engines burn less fuel at 20,000 feet than they do at 5,000 feet because literally the air is thinner, so there's less resistance, and it's colder, and so the engine operates more efficiently. And so, you know, the longer it takes you to get to cruise altitude, it impacts sustainability, impacts the customer experience, impacts delays. And so we're going to have to think about those infrastructure issues, starting with how much airspace should be available around the world for commercial aviation as we grow. So it gets down to those fundamental questions.
And a classic in sustainability is the not in my backyard, the NIMBY issue. And that is a serious issue with noise, which, you know, Pratt's technology addresses. We all want to fly more, we want to fly at more convenient times, and we want it cheaper, and we want shorter connections, but there's a traffic jam in the sky. And yeah, and especially over the Northeast corridor in California, where so many people are flying in and out of, probably exactly in this room. And when you try and make new roads, you change noise patterns. So if you're a citizen in your house and you're now hearing an airplane, you're also wondering why you suddenly have this noise and what we're going to do about it. And I mean, it becomes a real local issue.
So earlier we talked about the great challenge of climate change, and we talked about the target of preventing temperatures from rising 1.5 degrees centigrade, and the need to have peak emissions in 3 years by 2020 and then have it decrease. The International Civil Aviation Organization has been working on this issue and trying to figure out what's the steps that should be taken. What are the steps that need to be taken by the aviation industry to encourage a decrease to achieve these targets? And I just wonder if you can touch upon that, because I think it's really important. Since there's such a time crunch, and since it takes, our technological breakthroughs are not going to come at the pace to be able to achieve that. There's discussion about how do you offset emissions. And is that something you must be, as sustainability officers, you must be deeply involved in that. So could you just comment on that?
Well, I'll start on what the agreement is, and maybe you can comment on the emissions. Yeah. But so the Paris Climate Agreement didn't include aviation because there's a separate UN organization to do that. It's called ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, of which the United States and other countries are members of. So the COP21 moment for aviation happened in October, when the ICAO General Assembly passed a resolution saying that, post 2020 in phases, that the aviation industry will have to grow in a carbon neutral way. So if an airline wants to put on a new international route, they have to offset those emissions by either retiring a route, which is probably not going to happen, or by buying a fuel efficient jet engine, or by buying biofuels to use in the engine, or by looking at offsets as a way to do that. And so the public policy is coming in at the right time, and the technology is coming in at the right time to really address this rampant aviation in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the aviation geeks' lament. We are the only industry with our own binding agreement globally to reduce emissions and have carbon neutral growth. We have our own Paris, and there are 4 major ways we're going to do it. Part of it involves fixing what I refer to as the traffic jam in the sky through next-gen technology and air traffic control. Important but boring, so we'll leave it for another panel. Part of it is new jet engine options that are efficient. And part of it is biofuel deals, or more properly called renewable jet fuel deals, as we alluded to before. And part of it is offsets. Before we get to the offsets, I want to make an important point that we tend to assume the technology isn't here yet. In so many cases it is. His engine is here. We are buying them. We have 80 of them on order. We could have bought 80 of the old ones. We're buying new ones. And same thing with the renewable jet fuel. That fuel, the chemistry and the physics behind, the physics has always existed, so has the chemistry. The ability to use that physics and chemistry to make renewable jet fuel already exists. What we need to do is create a market for it, get it down to cost in a time period that's acceptable to publicly listed businesses.
Now to go to the offsets.
Yeah, and now to the offsets.
Yeah.
Yeah, offsets are an incredibly important way to address aviation emissions. You're not going to get to carbon neutral growth by 2020 without offsets. You're absolutely right. We offset heavily already. We have done over £1 billion in the past couple of years. And to meet the requirements under what I fondly called our own Paris Agreement, we're going to be looking at strategic purchasing of offsets ahead of time, hedging, much like we do fuel.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about offsets, so I just want to add a little bit to this. The interesting thing about offsets is that industry is often criticized for offsets because environmentalists say if you use offsets, you're going to slow down your commitment to breakthrough technologies. I don't buy that at all. I think that actually what I've seen with really responsible industry, and two great examples right here, is a deep shared value commitment to how do we get the best engine, the best technology, the most efficient uses of fuel so that we can actually solve this problem. Because it's people with families, little babies, committed to actually solve the problem. It takes time. That's the problem. We don't have as much time as it takes, and that's why pairing these breakthroughs with offsets is not a misplacement of activity. It's an essential partnership. And so the work so we've worked greatly, my organization has worked intensively on the civil aviation guidelines with the sense that if you can offset the protection of forests, you actually have a chance to actually make a major contribution in addition to what you're doing with your technological breakthroughs. Because the burning of forests is about 17% of the CO2 load. Stop deforestation, you double down on what you're doing. And I think that's really why I commend the International Civil Aviation Organization for actually setting an example. I wish other industries had the burden that you have because it actually, by being burdened this way, you're becoming the pioneers. And I think you should be congratulated on that. So let's look at some of these questions. And let's start with not having done this before, I take it that the numbers to the upper right-hand corner, that indicates how many people like this question, right?
Seems reasonable.
Okay. So how do you leverage your voice and industry position to address some of the perceived rollbacks in innovation on environmental policy by the current U.S. administration, channeling consumer voices?
Well, we've been developing this jet engine for 20 years. And we weren't developing it from a regulatory standpoint. We were developing it because our customers are asking for us. And we take that same approach to all of our business lines at United Technologies, whether it's Otis elevators or Carrier air conditioning. It's how we bring value to customers through sustainability. And so if we are bringing environmental value through using less fuel on a plane or using less electricity in an elevator or using less energy in an air conditioner, we're providing value to customers that's going to be a pull. And so the sustainability in this area is evergreen, right, because there's a business value for it that has tremendous environmental dividends that will come as a result.
Do you think that actually the administration's positions on Paris are catalyzing and encouraging more private sector intensity and engagement? I mean, is this an era of innovation?
Oh, yeah. And to the answer of, is this an era of innovation? I was, talking to some folks out in Silicon Valley the other day, and all the stereotype of Silicon Valley, and I'm in my suit and they're in their jeans. Consumers have become more comfortable with technologies that changed everything. And if you saw headlines recently, JetBlues has recently invested in an aviation company that's talking about electric airplanes. And people are more comfortable. It's, we refer to it as the Tesla effect. That self-driving cars are kind of warming up the consumer to different types of technology. To answer the heart of the question, I have to quote my old CFO, and that's something I never thought I would say on a sustainability panel. He taught me on my first day in the job, the first words to me out of his mouth were, "I don't approve business cases out of fear. Don't come to me with a request for a major capital investment because you think a regulation is coming down the line. And I and my group are held to the same standards for business cases and ROIs and payback terms that any other group in the company is. So I have to say, it's not, the winds of Washington don't affect us because of the way we originated our program in a business model.
Good, good. Second question, anonymous question. Is this push for advancing green aviation coming from consumers, users, or internally as a business strategy for competitive advantage? I think we've talked about that a little bit. The answer is
yes.
Yeah, all of the above.
All of the above. I mean, we have share owners, and so we have to satisfy our investments and justify our investments for our share owners. And we've just spent $11 billion to reinvent the jet engine and bring this to market. So we're hoping we have a competitive advantage in doing that. So that is a business strategy, but again, it's the shared value. It's responding to the customer demand in the first place, and it's the environmental benefits and dividends that come from that investment and the technology revolution in it.
So the market drives and costs drive so many decisions. Sophia, how are you able to generate internal buy-in from your executives and the middle management for your shift to biofuels when they're more expensive?
Right. So the first thing we addressed was safety, and I can't emphasize that enough given the brands we work for. Once safety was addressed, and actually had been addressed years ago, and we double-checked on all of that, the next issue was to address cost. And of course, by addressing cost, to address availability. And of course, it costs more because they're not making it, they don't have the law of large numbers to make it at volume and get efficiencies there. So what we did was say it costs more now, but let us help you get funding for your refinery and build your business in such a way that by the year you're delivering us fuel, it is cost competitive. So rather than take a passive statement, take a passive stance, sit back and wait and say, okay, you build it, then we'll buy it. We actually are continuously working with the partner to address the things that cost them more, like the cost of raising capital. Once you can address those costs, you can put it into the contract that the costs increase will not be passed on to JetBlue, because theoretically you're mitigating the cost increase over the years by the time you get the fuel. And then that's when you can really get top level buy-in, because again, you hit the sweet spot. No one wants to pay more for fuel. No one wants to be out there in open commodities market bidding against each other and not knowing what your first or second biggest cost is going to be next year.
So John, this partnership is a very, very powerful partnership. It's powerful in that it is an extraordinary example of from executive decisions, consumer demand, technological breakthroughs, and a financial commitment, a mega financial commitment by your company. How do you get your story out? Are you telling a story? Clearly we're in a storytelling era. How do you tell this story in a way that kind of has people understanding why you're doing it and brings real recognition to United Technologies?
It starts with forums like this, where we were in early discussions with the Share Value Forum, and I suggested, have you ever spoken about aviation at this summit? And the time is now. We're at an inflection point with growth in aviation to talk about the normal way of doing it or a more sustainable way of doing it. And so it really starts in rooms like this where we can share the story with major stakeholders and customers to talk about how this is an industry response. It's not just one actor in the industry that's addressing this. It's an entire industry response that's standing up, as Sophia said, is accepting self-regulations to lower climate emissions and advance forward. So we use every opportunity that we can to talk about the technology and its breakthroughs, but it's so much more powerful when you can do it with other stakeholders who are using that technology and then doing even more things to advance sustainability.
So you are a consumer-facing brand,
Absolutely.
Sophia. And we talked earlier about the impact that consumers have on you by calling you and making their points. how do you go back to the consumer? And do you actually go back to the consumer telling this story?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that through all the traditional ways of connecting with the consumer. Traditional media, social media, on board, on your flight, with videos, on your menu card, with your survey after the flight. And to your original question, I've never met a chief marketing officer or a head of communications who said, don't tell me something nice about the brand I'm working for. I mean, everyone is looking for content. You know, put meat on the bone, and what these groups that we work with, sustainability, social responsibility, and what I'm sure many of you work with, represent that content so that you can create that customer association beyond the core product and get the conversation beyond price.
Great. I think that we are going to wrap up now. Great questions. Thank you for sharing with us the story and the progress, and we applaud you and appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it was nice to meet you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.